Hi everybody, and welcome back. In this section of the multi-part tutorial for working with Unique Fabrics 2, we are going to be getting started and going over the basics of the set. This video will cover a little bit of information on the individual textures included in the set, some of my thoughts on why I made them or what I was thinking of when I made them, some useful terminology and information to know before using the set, such as what is a shader or what is a UV map, some tips on using the surface selection tool, and also finally getting into playing with the base shader presets that come with the set and modifying and adjusting them. I know, yay, right? So without further wait, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I wanted to do was point out the pattern key again. So in the very first video, I believe, I had brought up that I included a pattern key in the texture folder for this set. You'll find it in your Daz 3D content library under Runtime, Textures, Art Collab, Unique Fabrics PT2, and then the file is called patternkey.jpg. If you're having trouble finding it, please refer back to that first video because I actually show the path and everything of how to get there. But I wanted to bring up the pattern key so I could just go over fairly quickly here what I was thinking kind of when I made these, or what I thought that these would be good for. It's worth mentioning that obviously what I was thinking doesn't have to be how you use them. And I find that most of the time people are far more creative than even I am. So, so I'm sure you're going to find more exciting uses, but I wanted to at least give an idea of why I made them. So if we kind of zoom in here a little bit, beaded 01 through beaded 03 were created to give kind of a sophisticated, heavily beaded type of look to the surface that it's applied to. So you'll notice like you've got a lot of these little kind of beaded looking sections. If you're looking for something to be exceedingly beaded, I would go with beaded 01 or beaded 03. 03 personally being my favorite for if you want something to look really beady. Is beady a word? Beaded 02 is very, very like elegant looking to me. So I could picture like a queen or a princess or something kind of wearing it. The pattern is very intricate, and so is the beading on that one. So that was kind of what I was going for with these three. The focus was kind of on like beading. In the next two, beaded 04 and 5, I was kind of picturing the 1920 style like flapper dresses. Not necessarily the sequined look, because these don't really look like sequins and I didn't try to make them look like sequins, but just more the kind of tightly packed feel to the patterns on those. So if you look, there's like a lot of little tiny parts making up these patterns. They are exceedingly pretty on a lot of different fabrics and stuff. That said, these two, especially this one, looks really, really cool on the geoshell, which when we get to that part of the tutorials, I'll go over that and I'll kind of show it, because this one was my favorite to play with on the geoshells. As a matter of fact, it made it into the first, my main promo for these tutorials. And then beaded 06 through 09 is basically kind of beaded materials where I wanted a bit of a more balanced approach. So the beading is not supposed to kind of overpower the overall pattern. It's kind of supposed to work a little bit more with it. So it's kind of where the pattern is the focus, and then kind of the beads are more of an accent. And then down here, for pattern 01 through pattern 03, I did those to give kind of a simple but kind of detailed texture for when you want just a singular surface color, when you don't want like an area or a part of the fabric to have like a ton of information in it or to be very busy. These have just enough little details to where they're not boring and it's not just like a flat color, but not so much that it becomes overpowering or can't be used in conjunction with other parts of the outfit. When you look at them individually, they all have a little bit different characteristics. So like pattern 01 is more subtle and kind of soft. It just has a little bit of pattern variation kind of going for it. If you look at 02, you'll notice it has kind of almost a quilted look to it, as well as 03. 02, the quilted look is there, but it's not accentuated, so it just adds a little, and if the light hits it, it kind of adds some detail, but it doesn't really have a ton of depth. On 03, I kind of accentuated the depth, so it's a little bit more contrasted. Pattern 04, we're gonna call my like dream catcher southwestern flare. I don't know what I was making. I just thought it looked really pretty. In this tutorial, I'll probably load it on because I like to show this one kind of large. Like I think it looks really pretty as like a kind of a design element when shown really big. Pattern 05, you will notice does have kind of some beading on there. Shh, do not tell anyone. It can work pretty well as just a regular pattern. So depending on how you kind of have this part in the image, like whether it looks more metally or not, it can kind of pass as a beaded texture or it can pass as just a regular pattern. And if I'm honest, I ended up with like 10 of these that I really liked, which this one was included in, but only 9 of these or 8 of these. And I didn't really like the thought of having like 10 of this and 8 of this. So I kind of thought that this worked either way. So I moved it down there. Don't tell on me. It'll be our secret. Pattern 06 through 09 are meant to be more like standard cloth patterns. So like the butterflies is just like a pretty detail to a cloth. Then you've got like the kind of multicolored zigzag line thing going on pattern 07. Pattern 08 kind of has like a feather or like a leaf type look to it. It can be really nice on like textiles. So like you could add it to like say furniture and it would look very pretty, like just as an accent to certain pieces, like say on a couch or on a specific chair in a scene. Could even work really as wallpaper, curtains. It actually does look very pretty on fabrics though too. So this one kind of can work pretty nice for a lot of things. Actually, a fair few of these can, but this one especially. And then the very last one is kind of like a flowery vine type combo. And it's just kind of a run-of-the-mill kind of regular kind of pattern look. And I had a lot of fun with these vines in different ways. You'll see that later because it'll come up in the tutorials as well. But that gives you kind of a little bit of an overview of what I was making, why I kind of made them, why I used the ones I did. If you have any questions on that, please let me know. And I will have a thread up in, I think the commercial forum. So if anybody has any thoughts or ideas or things they'd like to see in future packs, by all means, please go to that thread and let me know. And now let's go ahead and we're going to pop open DS here next. So the next thing that I wanted to go over was basically kind of getting into what's a texture, what's a surface, what's a shader, what's a tile. Like knowing those things makes understanding these kind of sets much easier. So to get started, I want to kind of show you some stuff in here first, and then I'm actually going to go outside of DS to show a couple more things. So the key terminology for this kind of set is going to be trying to understand what a tiling texture is. So basically a tiling texture is a method of repeating a texture more than once across a polygon, tile or a group of polygons. Tiling is a common method of using the smallest texture possible to cover a large area, like a small texture of a couple bricks, and then repeating it over and over again to make an entire wall. And that definition came from Wikipedia, so thank you to them. Shader preset is also going to be a term worth knowing. So these are shader presets. So what is a shader preset? A shader preset is a generic preset that can be used on any surface or mesh that has been saved with various settings by the creator to be easily applied to any model. So it's just, you kind of click on something, you double click, and it can be added, and you can add it to anything. I could add it to Genesis 8. I could add it to this shawl. I could add it to anything that I like. Special thanks to Richard in the forums for that definition. And then material preset. So material preset is specific to a mesh or surface and cannot be tiled or applied to other models. So a material preset is like when I go in the folder for this dress and I double click the material that's in there and it applies it specifically to here. But if I try to apply it to a different model, that won't work. And we'll go into why now. But the first thing I wanted to do is point out another term, which is, what is a UV? So for this, I am going to switch really quickly into wire texture shaded. Maybe. There we go. Maybe not as quickly as I thought, right? And then I am going to split my screen here. Maybe. Okay. And we are going to switch this view here into UV view. Now, right now, you're not going to see anything. Well, unless you're clicked on something, then you will, like if you try to follow along. But you should have this as UV view, and then you want to make sure that you have it as view by material. So then if I hit the surface selection tool and I click on an area, you're going to notice that there's a little kind of picture of that specific area of the model. So if we zoom in here, really, really big. Whoop, too big. Okay. But so basically it is showing like this kind of area. You can think of a UV in the following way, like basically a merchant like myself or a million other really awesome ones. I am not as awesome, but there are a lot of very awesome ones. But so a merchant will make a model and it'll be made in 3D space, like say this dress. And then they will kind of cut that model into little bits and flatten it in 2D space. So think of that as like if you took a piece of cloth and threw it on an ironing board and ironed it out. So basically this is a 2D representation of the polygons that make up this section of this 3D model. So these little squares right here are the polygons. Those polygons together make up a big model. And then you can section or group those polygons into different groupings. So that is what makes up a surface. Like if I go through and I select all of these polygons here and all of the polygons on the other side over here, I can make them a set of polygons and say those polygons are top panels. So that gets your surface name or your material zone name. Both of those words I feel are kind of interchangeable. And a material zone is considered to be a group or set of polygons that make up a specific area of the model, such as like a collar or a door. It's used to specify or identify that specific group of polygons for easy editing within a shader. And a shader is going to be all of this doohickey information. But so you basically select those polygons, you give it a material name, and then in 2D space, you do what's called a UV map. So you tell it to take this piece and flatten and iron it out, and every polygon here will be represented on this 2D representation here. So that's kind of the basics. I'm going to give a couple more seconds to this to kind of explain it yet better, because I feel like this is one of those concepts that gets confusing for people. So we are going to go into a different program, which is called UVMapper Pro. Now in here, I made a little dress. Well, I didn't make the dress in UVMapper Pro, but I made a little dress and brought it into UVMapper Pro. And as you can see, like, here are the polygons that make up this dress. So you have all these little squares and some triangles and stuff like that that are making up the dress. Over on the left-hand side, right here, let me shake it for you, is the flattened version of these pieces. So this right here, like this section, is this piece that's in red with the heart going through it right here, flattened down. This is going to be this piece kind of ironed out and flattened down. And if you notice, like, you can't see, like, see where all these little folds are? You don't see that in this side. Like, you don't see that on the UV map. And basically the way the UV map works is, once the merchant kind of selects the polygons and flattens them down in a mapping program, and UVMapper Pro is such a program, but there's other ones like UV Layout. A lot of modeling programs have their own UV mapping in them, like 3ds Max and Silo and Modo. Like, most of them have mapping inside them. But so basically, you know, you take the model, you kind of cut it into bits, you flatten those down in a UV mapping program, and then you would take that 2D representation and you would save out this template, because that's what this is called. You would save out the template, you would take it into something like Photoshop, and then you would paint on it, which is what I did. So what you're seeing right here, like as far as color, is my template. Well, it's my texture, quote unquote, that I made in Photoshop for this. So if I go to clear, you'll see that's going to disappear, and that's not actually on here. Like, it's just a white plain looking thing. I could go to let's see, texture, checker color, and I could look at the stuff this way. So if you look, like, right here on this part of the map is this section right here on this part of the top. Right here, like in the one square, well, the one green square is this section right here of the top. So you do a UV map, you would take that into, like, say, Photoshop, Paint Shop Pro. Oh, what's the other one? I don't know. There's a lot of paint programs, but there was two of them I was thinking of, and I lost the name of both of them. But you take them into any of those, you just take the map in, and then you use that map as a guide, and then you can make something like this. So I bring that in. Now you'll notice this time you don't see all the little polygons on here. That's because I saved one with the actual template over top of my texture, and this one is just the texture without the template. So if you look over here, where the heart is here, it is going to be in the same place on the model. So for each one of these polygons, there's a polygon that matches it on the model. And when you paint on those polygons in this space, it will apply to the same areas on this space. And I did this little area right here. So we're going to switch back. Load. So if you look right there, okay, and I'm going to zoom way in now, you'll see that this little purple part here is literally just like one square polygon and one little tiny rectangle one here, and then one square polygon here. If you look here, you've got one square here, there's the little square down the middle, and then the other square here. So if I put purple on, like, say this square right here, it's going to be on that square over here. So that basically is what a UV map is and how it works with a model. And when you use a UV map to texture an outfit, that is how you get a regular material for an outfit. So you get a texture basically for that outfit. So if I go to the one where I don't have my map on it, this would be my texture. So I could literally take this model into DS, load this texture, which right now, let's see here, I can't hide the, let's see, display. Can't do that. I was gonna try to get rid of the map over top for a second, but I can't in this because it's made for mapping, so it doesn't want you to get rid of that. But, or maybe you can, and I just don't know how to do it. Maybe there's a wireframe. None? Haha! I found it. I learned something new today. I've never tried to do that. But okay, so this is what the texture looks like. So I took it into Photoshop. I put that map that you saw in front of this a minute ago over top of it as a layer, because you can save out maps, UV maps. And then I just painted on it, and this is now the texture for that. Now, the thing about this texture is, say I really like this heart with these little purple lines, and I'd like to put this on another outfit. It cannot go on to another outfit because the polygons for that outfit, the little squares that make up the model, are not going to be the same size. They're not going to be the same shape. They're not going to be in the same position, and they're not going to be mapped the same either. So I can't just take this picture, like this texture that I made, and put it on whatever I want. That's the one drawback to working with a regular texture or like a regular material for something, is that you can't do that. You also can't tile it. So say I wanted this heart to be smaller on here. If I kind of come across this and, oh, I know how to do this without looking. And I start to tile this. So right now I'm tiling this. Now you're going to see it is tiling my texture. It's repeating over and over and over again. And like we said, tiling texture is a way of repeating a texture more than once across a model, basically, or a group of polygons. It is repeating it, but obviously you wouldn't want a picture of a dress on your dress. So that doesn't really, like, that doesn't work out well. And you can see right now, like, it's really across this whole thing like crazy. A regular texture or a regular material will take up this little square right here, which is like a 1x1 UV space. So it just can't be tiled across like this. Like it's looking at this as being like a picture that's going to replicate. So I'm just getting little dresses everywhere. And if we kind of come back down, back to 1x1 space again, okay, now it's fine. Where the shader sets like mine and other ones that use tiling textures differs is that texture can be brought in, and I'm going to bring in one of mine here. Okay, so right now it's on the piece and it's going across. Now I want to bring back the wireframe here. So we're gonna bring that back so we can see it. So, okay, here's the wireframe for this dress. And that texture is going across the entire thing. Now, if I were to tile this, what you are going to see is that it can be tiled across this surface. So this specific tileable texture can go across the surface without any problem. Now you will have what's called a seam. So anywhere where the merchant may have put in a seam, there'll be a seam. Like, so I had one right down the middle on this piece, which would not necessarily be ideal for using a shader, but I wanted to kind of have a seam in there so you could see how it works. There's also a seam right here. So if you notice, the pattern comes down and then it doesn't continue on. It all of a sudden is over here. That's because if you look at the shirt, here is the shirt on the UV map, and here is the waistband, and they're not like connected or lined up to each other. If this, and this were just all one great big piece, then I could tile across all of this and there would be none of these weird lines going through, if that makes sense. And I don't know if it's like easier or harder to see as it gets, I think it's probably maybe a little easier to see as it gets bigger. But so that is how you get seams. Now, depending on how an outfit is mapped, most of the time the seams are pretty buried. Like most people wouldn't necessarily map it like I just did this with the gap between the two sides or the front and back. But you can see how this can be applied across this thing. So if I were to take this back the other way here for a minute. Okay. And now we are going to just look at one area. So select by material, skirt. So we're just going to look at the skirt now. If I were to tile that by itself, you'll see that there's not any seam really right here. Like you don't see a seam down the middle like you did on the other piece, because this whole section, this whole front is one piece and the back is one piece. So the seam is this edge right here. And those are down the side. So that would be what's called a natural seam. So the seam is someplace where a seam would naturally be, which would be right down this sideline. But so hopefully that gives you an idea of even what a seam is. So like a seam, a UV texture, what a shader is, what tiling textures are, how UVs and materials and stuff work together. Hopefully that gives you a basic idea. If it's still confusing or you have more questions, please don't hesitate to ask me in the comments for the video. Also, please know that if you are somebody that's newer to Daz Studio, one, don't let yourself get overwhelmed. There's a lot to learn, but it's a lot of fun and you'll get there. Like you'll get it. It just takes a little time and then you'll be overwhelmed and then all of a sudden stuff will click and that just goes away kind of. Also of note, there is a forum in the Daz 3D forums called the New User Forum, and then there's also the New User Challenge Forum. It is ran by a really, really nice group of people who are customers customers on the site who have like used Daz Studio and are really well versed in it. And so we all run challenges and they all kind of teach different parts of Daz Studio to help people get comfortable and give people advice on renders. So if this is something that is confusing you and you want more information, that's also the New User Forum and the New User Challenge Forum are also a really great resource and a really great place to start. So, okay, that is probably enough of this at this point, and hopefully that gives you a decent idea. So let's get rid of all this now. And let's go ahead and get into Daz Studio where we can do better things. More fun things than learning definitions, right? So the next thing I wanted to go over is basically using the surface selection tool. Now, in the other video, I kind of gave the basics. You know, if you hover over it, it tells you what the surface is that you're hovered over. So this is skirt, this is top panels, this is trim, this is top panels. If I click on it with this tool, it's going to select it, and it's also going to select the object in the scene tab as well. If I were to say, press and hold the control key and click another surface, it would select both of them. So if I go into iRay mode, which makes it a little easier to see here, you'll see that I'm select on both these. I have selected both of these areas. If I want to select, say, this entire object in my scene, if I'm in the surfaces tab, I can click on the title, so up or down right here, and it will select everything. If there's something that I don't want to have selected, like I select everything, but then I go, you know what, I don't want top panels. If I press and hold control and just click on that, it should, oh, nope, it's not going to do it. Why? Is it Alt? No. Oh, maybe it only works if you do it this way. Huh, that's interesting. Okay, if you do it this way, you can't do this. So, oops. On the other hand, if you have like a list selected this way, which if you wanted a whole list selected, and actually Genesis is going to be a better thing to use. So you'll see Genesis has a ton of surfaces. If I click on the word surfaces, it selects everything. So you can see her whole outline going here. If I click on an individual thing, it's going to just select that specific area, like just her ears or whatever. There's also up here something called selection sets. So basically Daz went through and grouped some materials together so that it would be easier for you to access them. Like fingernails and toenails are grouped together in this little section here called just nails. So you could change all the nails at one time if you do this. Or you could click on one, press and hold Control on your keyboard, and then click the other. If I wanted to like select everything from arms to toenails, I could click on arms, press and hold Shift, click toenails, and I would be selecting all of it. If I then decided, I didn't want the face, I could press and hold Control and click again, and it's going to get rid of the face. So let's keep going with this. I want to get rid of the eye sockets, the eye moisture, the ears, the cornea, the head, the lips, the mouth, the pupil, the sclera, the teeth. And I still manage, iris is hidden there. But you can see if I press and hold Control, if I click once on a material name or a surface name, it's going to select it. If I click it again, it's going to deselect it. And if I want to do like a group and a line, like say I want from cornea to eye socket, if I press and hold Shift, I can grab those. If I then want to add some other ones, like say I want to add lips and mouth, I can press and hold Control and then click on those two, and it will add those two. So that's just kind of some general maneuverability so that when you're coming through, you can kind of select things fast. Shift will not work in this view. So if you're using the selection tool, you can't use Shift over here. But what you can do is just press and hold Control and click anything you like. So I could click here, I can click here. I can then even go to a different model. So I could select like the cape, which is on a different object over here. See where it's part of the upper cape. And if I click that, it's going to select both of those objects in the scene. And then it's going to select the materials I clicked on within those two different objects. So here's the cape, the full cape, here's the full gown, and I was like just selecting singular things between them. You can also do that holding Control and just doing it over here. But that is the basics of basically kind of working with the surface selection tool and within the surface pane to kind of go back and forth between surfaces, which is very handy when you're playing with shaders. Another thing that is worth mentioning is that, and I'm going to do something here real quick. So I'm going to clear this. Well, no, I'm not going to clear that surface that way. We will say that I played around with this surface with a shader. And we're just going to do that by adding pink to this piece. If I wanted to then copy whatever I have going over here to another surface, if you right click, you can hit copy selected surface, click the other one, right click again, paste to selected surface. So you can copy and paste across surfaces. So you'll note now I made all of that white. Or pink. Wait, it was white. I made it pink. Now, in this case, as we just went over, this has an actual texture map, not a tiled texture like what the shaders are. So I can't like say take this right now because it's got this texture map that's made just for this piece. If I were to copy this and paste it to say, where do I want to paste it? We'll say to this piece. It's not going to probably look quite right here. And I don't know, like if I turned her around it, but hey, that's just too close. If I swirl her around, hopefully you can see like where there's probably boo-boos. Yeah, right there. Do you see how there's like this weird dark line coming through here? Let me try to get in closer to it. Basically, the map for the cape doesn't match the mapping of the skirt part of the dress. So this texture can't work on this. And it was another way to kind of bring home, you know, why you can't just kind of take a texture across whatever you want. But so if you see right here, like I just made that go away, like the color, so that you could see a little better. But there's a texture on this. Like if I zoom way in, this is the texture for like some of the trim, I believe. Obviously that you don't want that on the dress. And actually that's the trim for the cape, funny enough. That's what that is. So if we went back to here, that line that we're seeing that was going across the back right in here is actually the texture for this piece right here. So if I kick up the UV map, it's this area on this map that's going across the dress all strange. And if we were to take a look at the skirt and keep in mind that kind of this area was the area we were looking at. If I go to the skirt here, it's going across the back of the dress, which is right in this area on the dress map. Hopefully you can kind of see that a little bit, or hopefully it at least makes sense a little. Like I said, it is one of those things that's a weirder thing to get used to. But anyways, I wanted to more point out how to copy and paste across things, but it was worth showing a point I made earlier a little more clearly. But okay, so that is how we copy and paste materials. And we also went over kind of working with the surface selection tool and selecting multiple surfaces. The only other thing I wanted to go over with the surface tool before we actually play was that when you click, you get this yellow outline. Now, to make it go away, you could just click on the node selection tool. And as long as you don't click anywhere over here, like in this view, or in this panel, or over in this panel, as long as you're only clicking around in the library, so just in the content library or smart content, as long as you're only clicking in those areas, that will stay selected until you click someplace else. So that will clear the yellow outline if you want to see real quick. Also, if you're on that tool and you really just don't like the outline, or you feel it's too obtrusive, so you want it, but you don't want it to be kind of maybe as in your face, if you go to tool settings, while you have the surface selection tool highlighted, or if you go down the list to it, there is an enable and a disable for the surface selection tool. And then there's also an outline width. So if I can't see this well enough and I want to see it better, you can take that up to 5. I don't think you can go any higher than that though. No. So you can take it as high as 5 or as low as 1. At 1, it's still there, but it's definitely not as obtrusive as it was. I kind of leave it at 3 for the videos, and because I generally like to see where I'm at, and then I just kind of tend to click on this real quick instead of playing with this. But just know, if you don't necessarily see the usefulness to this outline, there is a way to disable it, make it smaller. Now, we are going to finally move on. Yay! So in this next part, I want to go over using the shader presets. So the presets are all of the files that show up in the main folder right here. So unique fabrics, merchant resource 2, they show up right here. But in order to play with those, we have to talk about a different folder first, which is under utilities. Now there's a lot of things under utilities right here, but we just want the very main folder, utilities. When you're playing with this set, you are going to need to do something with the original textures on the outfit. So like if I come on this and I just, I don't know, double click and add something, I'll just add this one for now. You're going to notice like it doesn't look like this. It's still got like the weird transparency on here. There's something weird going on. If I went to scaling to make it look more beady, and we're going to do it like 20 times. Well, what's going on there? I've got this little loopy thing going over and over again. It's because there is still a texture map that, remember, cannot be tiled from when we were in the other program and I was showing like what happens when you tile. There is a texture map way down here that is a regular texture map and thus can't be tiled. So basically what it's doing is taking this image right here and multiplying it across the transparency map or the cutout opacity for this piece. So what makes it look see-through? Obviously, that would not be what we want. Now, there may be occasions where you do want that there. So, like, say I just wanted to kind of change the color of this. I may want to keep this trans map. I may really like the textures on it. I may like everything else, and I just want to play with, say, the colors or something. Well, in that case, I want to leave this on. Like I want to be able to leave some of these maps on, but that's not every case. And since I have no way of knowing what you want to change and what you may not want to change, what I did was made some like one-click solutions to clear the original textures in different ways. So this first thing here is just kind of a direction. So it's just kind of explaining what the other things do. So it says, you know, the following will help you clear any existing textures on clothing items you would like to retexture using the shaders. So it just gives you an idea of what these are doing. The ones that actually say shader on them, if you're clicked on a material zone and you use those, it's going to apply different settings. So this very first one, if all else fails, start with this one. This is basically a clear all. What it does is clears all of the information in this shader. So like all of these values that are in here, all of these maps that are in here, like this metal flakes weight and all this stuff, it will clear everything. So if I double click this right now, do you see how everything over here went away? So that's a good, like, I want to get rid of everything and I want to start from scratch and do my own thing. Then you have 3 that are clear partials. So the clear partials are for when you do want to keep some parts. And I try to guess things that you might like to keep or might not like to keep, and try to make some presets to help with that. So the very first clear partial is one that will clear all the existing textures and material settings except for the settings for the bump, displacement, the normals, and the transparency maps. So if I were to use this one and I come over here and click on this again, okay, now we're gonna look down through here and see what we've got. We don't have a bump, we don't have a normal map. We do have the transparency map though. So if I use this to clear, it should get rid of all this other stuff. So all this metallicity stuff, all of this, but still leave just this. And you will see that that's exactly what it does. So if I want to keep bump, normals, displacement, transparency, like all those things, that's when you'll use this preset. And using this preset is a really easy way to just come in and modify or manipulate the colors of different textures on an outfit. So like if you really, really like this shawl, but you want it to be a different color, like I want it to be a green, you can do that just by double clicking this and then adding the green. Now, if you were doing this by hand like I am right now and just playing with the colors, I will say glossy roughness is your friend. And if you're trying for like fabrics type stuff, you probably want to turn that up so it doesn't look all glossy. Was worth pointing that little dial out. But so that is what clear partial 1 will do. Clear partial 2, let's go back. Help! Did I get all the way back yet? Yes. Oh, too far. One step too far. Come back. Okay. Now, clear partial 2, what does that do? Clear partial 2 is when you want to leave the bump, the displacement, and the normals, but you do not want the transparency map. So as an example, say I want to load one of the transparency maps that comes with this set. or say that with unique fabrics rather, or say that there's another texture, there's another transparency map for this shawl that I prefer to use. And so I might want to load a different one up. So I want to get rid of the one that's on here. That's when you will use kind of this one. So if I double click this, in this case, it's pretty much going to clear everything because this didn't have a bump or normal or anything. And you'll see the trans map, which is the cutout opacity, is now gone. Like this is all gone. If I were to use this on a piece like this piece right here, let me see if I can get, oh, well, that'll work. I'm zoomed in pretty good. If I was to use that on this piece, and I need to rotate it around or you're not gonna be able to see much. Back up, back up. Okay, sorry for the garbly there for a minute. It'll take a second to get it back into focus. Okay, so if I use this on this piece, what you'll notice is it's going to get rid of the transparency map or the cutout opacity down here, but this bump and this normal are still going to be on there. So if I double click on this piece, you see this line and ridge that's going around right here. And I don't know, it might be easier if I make the base color a little bit sort of darker. And I darken this up a little bit. Okay. Hopefully you can see the line that's kind of cutting through this piece right here. Like just right through the texture. That is what is on this. And it's that little like zigzag kind of that's in white going around. That's what this is right here. It's like a little seam or a design thing. So this is what you'll use if you want to clear most of the stuff, but just leave the bump, the displacement, and the normals. So like I could use it on, say, this piece, so the trim as well. Now the trim, if I move in, has kind of like little stitches and stuff like that, if you can see them right here. So if I use the clear partial on this, hopefully you can see the stitches are still there. And again, everything's a little too bright to see well. So we'll kind of darken this up for a minute so we can see it. But you can see the stitching and stuff is still there. Just now I can change the color. So I could, you know, change it to whatever. So that is what this one is used for. Now, going back to the main camera, did I get back to, no, I didn't quite get back to where I needed to be yet. Not yet still. One more. No. Keep going. Ah! Too far again. Why didn't you warn me? I don't know how you were supposed to warn me, but why didn't you warn me? Okay, then this last clear is basically only going to clear the base color and the gloss color. So if we go back to this, it's literally only clearing everything in this channel right here and everything right here. So if I was to double click on this, you will see those two things are gone, but you'll notice all these other settings that we kept making disappear are now on here. So they're still there. So if like something has a leather material and you really like the leather, but you want to change the color, you could double click this and it'll pull all the color information kind of out. And then you could kind of put your own colors on it. In most cases, one of these will work for most instances. I did a bunch of trial and error, and hopefully you can tell by the by the plethora of promos that are with the set. But I tried it, and while I was trying it and playing with it and kind of doing the promos, I would notice like, oh, you know, it'd be good if I had this kind of clear, that kind of clear. And so I kind of added those in kind of after I used it a fair bit. But so that is how you clear things off. So if I want to now play with this dress, we're going to go to here and we're going to go for top panels and trim. And we're going to go, and we probably want to do clear existing, because if we don't, we're going to end up with like the transparency map on the skirt and all that, like we were talking about. So we're going to clear all to get this, to get the skirt and the top panels ready for us. And then we are going to go to the unique fabrics folder, and we are going to come in and we are going to pick one of the textures, and I'm going to go, I think I'll go for this red one, and we're going to load it on. Now, the first thing you're going to notice is that the pattern is on both of these. My clear over here, which I forgot to mention, automatically sets the tiling to 4 because I find that as a good starting point. So if you come down here, horizontal tile, vertical tile, 4. So it automatically sets it to 4. So the texture is tiled on both of these at 4, but why is this one look smaller than this one? The reason comes down to the map. So the UV map again. If we go back to UV view, this piece is a rather big piece on the model itself. So actually what I'm going to do is we're going to do a side by side for a minute. Okay. So this piece is very long, kind of big. It's flowy. It's a very big area in this 1x1 square. This is a smaller area that actually is fairly large in this same 1x1 square. So what's happening is when a merchant does the UV texture and they, you know, cut it and kind of flatten it out and like iron it to get the UVs, if they decide, like, say they want to get a lot of details in this top, they may make the top really big in the 1x1 space while making some other part kind of smaller perspectively, because for these to be the same, they would have to be the same scale in this space. So this little section, if I was to multiply it into this surface, like pull this out and paste it down here and see how many, probably this would fit in here 3 or 4 times, like down this dress, which means that this right here should be like only 3 to 4, like a quarter basically, or a third of this size in this space, if that makes sense. And obviously that's a lot bigger than like a quarter of this whole thing. So that's why these two don't look the same. The solution to that is basically to eyeball it. There isn't a brilliant way. Now you could look at it the way I just did, like how many of this will equal that, to get an idea in your mind of kind of where to start. So like I said, in this case, this top is probably, if I were to put it on this dress and kind of just paste it down the thing, probably 3 or 4. So we'll maybe go with 4. We'll say it takes 4 of these to make one of these lengthwise. So if I go to the scaling uniform folder, first I want to make this the size I want it. So I want it to be pretty beady. So maybe we'll go, I don't know, we'll try like 8x8 and see what we get maybe. And well, that's pretty decent. It's decently beaded. I kind of like the size. Maybe I want to go a little smaller, like 10x10. So, okay, now we got these little beads. Well, if I'm right, and this is kind of about 4 times a larger piece to this, then if I take 10x10 and multiply it by 4, which would be 40x40, I should get where these two pieces are about the same. And no, I was a little off. So apparently maybe only 3 of these would fit in here. So let's try 30x30. You'll notice 30x30 works, which means it's about 3 of these to make one of these. So now we've kind of lined up the scale. So if I go into a close-up here, you can see the circles are looking reasonably similar. Now I could keep fine-tuning this if there's still a little off, like this may be a little closer. Or I could decide, well, this is a little smaller, but I think I like it a little smaller, so I could kind of multiply the tile across this more. So we had it by 10, we could try maybe 12 or 13 and see. And I think we're getting fairly close here to having the scale about right. We're going to stick with 10 because I think that's about it when I'm looking across both. But okay, so if we look, technically we have now textured this piece. Like, it's as easy as that. Now, what happens if you do all that and then you're like, oh, I don't like this design, or I don't like this color. Maybe I want blue, but I just took all this time scaling these. If I switch to a different one, what's going to happen? Well, if I have both of these selected again and I double click on the blue, you'll notice the scale stayed. I did not save this scale information, so the vertical tiling and the horizontal tiling, I did not save it in my presets. That way, if you get it set up the way you kind of like it, and then you want to play with and experiment with the different colors or something, you can do that without having to keep redoing the scale over and over again. Another thing you can do is I could go, well, I don't like, this just isn't me. I'm not feeling this general. Like, I'm not feeling this general one at all. Maybe I want to try something else. I could double click on a completely different pattern and it's also going to keep that same scale. And obviously, as we can see, if I go to the close-up, you know, this looks very different in that same scale to what the other one did. Now, I may decide, well, that's pretty, but now it's a little too small. Like, I can't really make anything out. And maybe I want to be able to see the pattern better. Well, in that case, you'd have to go back in and kind of readjust for this pattern or for the look you're wanting. So you could go back into scaling and go, okay, let me start with 4x4. Let's see, do I like 4x4? Maybe I like 2x2, 3x3. We'll say I like 3x3. And we said we thought that this is probably about 3 times what this is. So let's try that theory. So 3 times 3 would be 9. Let's double click on the 9. And I'm thinking that that's fairly close. Let's look at the close-up camera here and see if the elements look fairly reasonably about the same size. This is maybe a smidge bigger, so I might be able to go to like 10x10. And that looks about perfect. Okay, so now, as you can see, I kind of switched designs, and now I've got a dress that looks completely different than the first one I was playing with. So that's about as easy as it is to go from one texture to the next. So I can just click through and keep kind of adding different ones. I can decide, well, you know, what's, I don't know, this one look like? I could add that on. So now we've changed it again. I could say, maybe I want to see what this one looks like. I could add that one on. I could decide maybe I want to see this one. Double click. And now, you know, this one's on. Now, the next thing I want to point out, because, okay, well, we just, you know, kind of flip-flopped through. We played with scale. There's something else we can play with. I did not put presets in, but I want to show you how to use it. And that is down here by the scale. So the horizontal tile and the vertical tile, there's something called horizontal offset and vertical offset. So remember I said that Dreamcatcher texture was going to come up. We're going to play with that now. So I'm going to load that up. Okay, there's the texture tiled on here. Now, in this case, I actually want this to be fairly big. So I'm going to adjust the scale. We're going to see 2x2, maybe 1x1. I'm going to go with 1. I would make this 3. Okay, so right now I've got this texture huge on this dress, and I really like this one like this. I don't know why, it's just a thing. But like, if you'll notice in the top here, I can't really see it. Like the way it's lining up with this, the mapping for this piece, the UV map that we've taken a look at a couple times now, it's just not showing me anything interesting here. So if you have where you want to dictate exactly where something lands, especially when you're using like 1x1, 2x2, 3x3, any of these kind of larger scales where the pattern's very big and you can kind of line up different areas, I highly recommend playing with the horizontal offset and the vertical offset. Just don't well, try not to mess with your tiles unless you really mean to. Like, obviously, if you really wanted this to be like stretched in some strange way, you could do that. But only play with that if you actually mean to kind of skew the texture. But we're going to say we want to adjust the pattern on both of these pieces so that it looks really interesting on this dress. If I were to try to play with the offset right now, and I go and start moving things, you see how it's like blinking out on me, and I can see stuff's moving, I mean, when I stop, but I can't kind of follow it along, which makes it very hard to like get really good placement of the parts that I want placed. Like it keeps coming in and out, in and out, in and out. So when you want to do that, I would highly suggest going into texture shaded mode. If you were using the presets, so the ones in the main folder. If you are using the white recolor bases or the masking and stuff with the white recolor bases, then you want to use filament in order to move the pattern around better. Mostly because you won't be able to see these in texture shaded. So like right now I can see this in this view. If I was to put the equivalent of this, which texture was this? Like 04, pattern 04. If I was to put the white base on for this instead, see how you can't see anything? If I go into filament though, I should ever so slightly, and hopefully you can see that, but maybe not. I can actually see parts of it in filament. Where, and if I go back to texture shaded, it was nothing. So that's why when you're using the white recolor bases and the stuff under there, you want to use filament. And if you're using the regular shaders, you want to use texture shaded. That would also go for anybody that's using kind of those kinds of things. Like if you want to try to align something, try texture shaded. If it doesn't work, try filament. But okay, so we want to kind of position this. So we're going to scooch this back a little and we're going to tie it, kind of turn it. So I'll just kind of leave it. Actually, I think we'll use the close-up cam. So that way we can see. And now when we move the offset, like you can see the pattern moving across, which is obviously much better than what we had a minute ago here where we couldn't see anything. And I can kind of move it and say, okay, you know, maybe I want it to be lined up like that. Let's move it down vertically and maybe see what I get. I could play around with it and decide, well, maybe this scale for the top part isn't right. Let's see if I could get kind of a mirrored thing going across the top. So right now I basically got this mirrored across the top. A different scale might work a little better, but I actually think this is pretty like this. So I could move it up some and see how it's looking. I kind of like the blue pieces here, kind of peeking out from the trim. I think that's a nice, kind of a nice touch, but I do feel like the scaling maybe needs to go down one. I think right now on this piece, I have it at 1. Let's try 2 and see what I get. So we'll go to the vertical offset again. We'll pull it across. I have a feeling this is going to work better. I'll move it down so I can see more of the design to get it lined up a little better. And what I'm doing is using this part, since it's got kind of a center, like you can see it now peeking out on this side. So I'm going to see if I can use that to kind of get it kind of symmetrical. I could also try to use these leaves. Now they might not line up perfect because it depends on the mapping. But it's like, okay, well, I can either go by the leaves or go by the center of the design. And maybe I want to more go by the leaves. No, I'll go by the center of the design, I think. So we're going to say I want to put it there. And then I'm going to move this up. I want to keep these kind of showing. So I'm getting it closer to what I kind of am picturing. Too far. Now you will find every once in a while, if you're trying to be real picky, you might have to click on the number and dial in like little tiny increments like so, just to move it like a smidge. But we'll say that this is how I want the top to look. Now the bottom at this point is much larger. And one could be smaller and one could be larger. I mean, there are clothing sets that do that. But since we made this scale smaller, I think I might make the scale smaller on this piece too. So let's see, we said 3 times. So if we're at 2, we probably need 6 to match. Okay, so we got that up now. I'm gonna probably move to my main camera here so I can see a little better. And now I could look at, you know, playing with the offset on this piece. Now you'll notice the texture is not necessarily going up and down or left and right like it did up here. That's because if you remember, the map on this is one big huge circle. So the UV map just has this as like a circle on the map. So when I'm moving the tile across this horizontally or up and down this vertically, it's moving it around a circle. That's why you're getting this kind of explosion thing going. But so what we're gonna do is I actually think I can use the editing cam here. I'm going to kind of bring this up in here. We're gonna see what we can get with this. So we're gonna say like maybe I want to kind of line this up more over this way. See, this is where you can get into trouble, like just trying to get stuff like I like it just so. Right now what I'm looking at is I kind of like this V, and I'm trying to see if I can line this up so that these little things are kind of exploding out of the V here, because I thought that might look pretty. And I think we're getting close. I just can't quite get it where I want it to go. And sometimes that'll happen. Sometimes the mapping won't work for what you're picturing. And sometimes you might have to improvise. So I might have to go, well, that's really important to me, and I really want that. So maybe I want to go back to the scale I was on and play again. So now I've got a much bigger thing to work with here. And I can kind of bring this up and down a little better. So we're going to move that way. We're going to try to move it over this way. Obviously, I'm getting a different look going now, and then I can move these up and see if I can get all these little orange like leaflets dangling down, which is kind of what I wanted. So I'm getting real close to kind of what I was picturing here. I'm just kind of tweaking it at this point. But we will say I want to go with that, and we're going to say since I put that back to 3, I'm going to go ahead and put this back to 1. Now, this piece doesn't exactly look the same, so I might have to play again with, hey, how do I want this to be in here? Maybe I want to kind of move the offset up till I just have some little pieces going through here. Like maybe I want it going across a little bit like this. So it's got kind of the design on this side and then some of the leaves coming out of the trim on this side. But you can see how you can get kind of a very unique looking outfit just by doing that. So if I go back into iRay, we can see what this looks like, because now we had a lot of fun and we just played with the offset and stuff. And there you have it. So that's what this outfit now looks like with that texture applied. Now we applied this texture and that looks nice, but it doesn't really go with the rest of this. Like it's kind of meh, you know. So what if I want to do something with, say, like the trim and the shawl? Well, since the dress has trim and also the shawl has trim, and might as well make the trim look the same between them, I'm going to click on both of those. I'm going to go to my utilities and figure out what I want to clear. And for right now, we're going to say, well, maybe I just want to add red to this. So I guess I just could clear the base colors, right? So I'll just use that. And now if you go into the white recolor bases folder, you will find a white base colors folder in here and a bunch of colors all in here. So if I go into reds to try to find, say, a red that might work well for this trim. And say I double click this. Well, that put that on there, but it looks weird. It doesn't, let's see, is it matching? It doesn't exactly look right. Like it doesn't quite look like the color I'm clicking. Let me see here. Let me back out of this. Let's just pick a regular color. We'll come up here and we'll put a green on it just to see what we get. Well, that doesn't look green. That looks like some kind of blue and green car product. Not really what I wanted. What's going on here? Why is this happening? The reason it is happening is because I picked the wrong clear to use. So I picked this one that cleared the colors, but there's color information down here under this metallic flakes. So if I were to just click on one of these right now, see how it says metallic flake color right here? And this one has that as well. And it has a map on it, so it has both. Basically, just clearing out the color didn't clear out these settings. So right now I have this color applying to the color I added up top. So we probably want to try this one instead, and we're going to just remove everything but the trans maps basically, and well, everything but the bump and the normal, which you can see those are still on here, bump and normal. It says there's maps, but nothing else is on here. So at this point now, if I go to my little reds folder and I go to this dark red, you are going to see that looks more normal. Like it doesn't look all crazy like it was. It has a pretty nice look to it. Now, I mentioned something about the glossy roughness. You may want to adjust that. I think there is a utility for it. And maybe it's this. Is it in this folder? No. Or maybe I forgot to add that. Oh, that's for the metallicity. No, I guess I don't have a preset for the roughness to kind of adjust it. I thought maybe I did. Must have forgot to do that. I'm sorry. Don't shoot me. Don't be mad. But basically, like, you might want to add some roughness, which is just this dial. So you just kind of turn it up a little. Usually around 70 to 80 if you want like just kind of regular cloth looking thing. So, okay, we did the trim now. Now I'm going to say on this piece, I actually want to keep the trans matte because I think the lace is very pretty. I just want to change it to a color that's going to match this dress. So I can go back to my utilities here. I can pick a clear that leaves the trans map. Well, let's see. This one would leave the trans map, but it would leave other settings. And I just want it to be the color that I choose, not with anything mixed with it. So I don't want this one. This one will get rid of my transparency map and I want to keep it. So that one won't work. So the winner is going to be this one. So if I double click that, you'll see now I've got where the cape is all cleared for me, and I can go back to the reds and I could pick the same red even if that's what I want. And I could also mess with the roughness again. Now, another thing I could do is I could press and hold Control and click this and this and this if I want them all to be the same color. And if I want them all to be the same roughness, I could kind of adjust them at one time. And it's as easy as that to change it. I could go, well, I wonder what like a blue would look like. And I could come into the little in-betweens folder because this is kind of like an aqua-y blue. Could come in-betweens. That's too green. This is the right kind of blue. Let's see what blue looks like. Oh, too much. Too much. Too much. The dark blue is kind of pretty, but nah. What about the kind of like burnt orangey? Do I have something like that? Well, that's actually very pretty. I actually think I like the burnt orangey color best. I got a darker version of that. And a lighter. I actually feel like this is almost the perfect color. I could try desaturating it a little bit here. No, I think I like it like that. But as you can see, you can kind of click through, and that fast, we completely changed the look of this outfit. And now that you kind of know how to use the presets and just the basics of kind of playing with the colors, you can literally go through here quick and keep changing it and changing it and changing it. So I could come back up here and let's go to another one that looks pretty when it's big. So let's maybe try this texture. I could double click this. I'm applying that now to here and here. I could come in and now click all the trim if I had the surface selection tool on. So I click this trim, and we're gonna say, maybe I wanna go with the blacks. I could go down to grays, and usually you use this dark gray 09 and not the 10. The 10 looks weird, it doesn't catch light. So I suggest the 9. There are some instances where you want this 10, but I figure I'll mention it while I'm in here. But okay, so we'll go to 9. I think that looks decent. I'm gonna come to this piece, and I think I'm going to see if I can't get towards a gold, which the colors that kind of will turn gold for you are gonna be the in-between B colors. Any of these, if you add a little metallicity, which there is metallicity presets in this folder. But if you add a little metallicity to it, you'll get a gold color. So if I wanted a gold that looks like this gold, it needs to be more desaturated. So maybe in here somewhere looks close. So let's try this, and then we'll add in some metallicity to it, and we'll turn back the roughness just a little. It looks a little too metal, too heavy metal, man. Let's try like 75. Let's see what that looks like. And that fast, we now have a fairly decent different look to this. Now there's probably some other things I'd want to do for this cape to kind of look kind of perfect with this, but it looks pretty good. And if I'm not digging on the gold the way it's working, I could just kind of go to the black color and do it like that. I could have also came to here and did the copy and paste, but the cutout is not on here on this piece. So if I copy and paste, I'd be getting rid of the cutout here. Now I can copy and paste from this surface to this one, and oops, I just right click to try to do that. You can't do that way, just for the record. But you can see how you can fairly easily just keep switching from texture to texture to texture. You can also see how you can play with scale on this stuff and get completely different looks from the same textures you were just playing with. Obviously, like some of these look better at different sizes than others. So let's see what this one looks like. It actually kind of looks neat, kind of big. I don't know. That seems very dark to me. That's kind of prettier. But so we could say, I like this now. And actually the black and stuff kind of works for this one too, but we're gonna go to like a purple instead. Maybe we'll try the light purple and see how that looks. Kind of click off of here so I can see better. Actually that might be too light. I did click all the areas I wanted. Yeah. Try a little darker, maybe like there. And now we've got kind of yet a different look going. I just wanted to kind of keep flipping through here for a couple just to show kind of how simplistically it is just using the presets. We didn't even get into all the other stuff that you could do with the set, but just using, you know, the base clears with existing things and then playing with the colors, or just using the base presets and playing with the scales and kind of flip-flopping around. But I mean, so far we've taken this one dress in a lot of different directions. I'm gonna run out of stuff to do eventually, but hopefully this gives you a good idea of how to use the main presets, like how to use the base presets and what you're capable of doing with them. I'm getting sidetracked now because I'm like having fun playing this. You probably don't want to watch me play with the pack. Now you'll notice I just double click this. See, this is why sometimes it's good, because I double click this and nothing happened. I'm not in the base colors folder right now. This is base pattern masks, and this does something completely different that we have not gone over yet. So if that happens and it doesn't seem like something's applying, you probably came out of this folder. So let's get to the right folder, and I can double click that again and see what this looks like. And that's not quite dark enough. I need something darker. That's nice and dark. That's kind of pretty. But I mean, how many different, I don't know how many different things I just did. Like how many for this one dress. And they all look very, very different. We are going to stop this video here because when you get to the playing part, like I can kind of play all day and we're already pretty long on this video. So we are going to cut it here. And in the next video, we are going to be covering customization. So we're going to be using the white bases that are here and the white base colors, the white base pattern masks, 1 and 2, the transparencies. We'll be mixing and matching these things with the base shaders or the presets. So we'll be doing a lot of fiddling now that we've got all of the basic stuff out of the way, and we've kind of covered like how this stuff all works together and how to kind of utilize it. From here on out, it's a lot more fun and a lot less let's give a definition. I promise. If you're somebody that's, you know, been around and used the software for a while, hopefully you kind of maybe skipped over the parts that you weren't really interested in. And for those that didn't know this information, hopefully that helps and it gives you enough information to at least understand kind of what you're doing and how these things all work together. Because having a working knowledge makes utilizing your shaders, like any shaders that you buy, way more useful. Like if you understand when you move things to the left or right with like say the horizontal or the vertical offset, you understand that it's moving it across the map for this piece. So the UV texture, the little iron flatty thing. Stuff like that makes it handy for when you are trying to fine tune things. But now that we've kind of gone over that, we're on to all playing now. It'll be all playing all the time, other than maybe some little tips or some little extra tidbits, but nothing exciting now. That we're going to be good and we're going to be just covering simple stuff and be straightforward now. And with that, that is the end of this section. I want to thank you very much for following along. I know that this video ran really long, kind of longer than all the rest. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments, and I will see you in the next section. Bye.